Gene's number one in my book, okay? He's great. And so, hey, I want to start our time together with a story. I grew up as one of four boys to my parents in Northwest Los Angeles. And like any great family that has four boys and all of that testosterone all the time, there was a constant set of emotions that drove my mom crazy, as you could probably imagine. And one of the scenarios that always drove my mom crazy is when we all got to that certain age where we were old enough to all sit in the front seat. And you have four boys competing for the front seat in the one car that we would drive around with mom. And so it got to the point where we had the rule of shotgun. You guys remember that rule? Or you would see the car. Our rule is you had to see the car with your eyes, and then you yell shotgun, and whoever did it got front seat. And the reason that you wanted to do that is because you controlled the radio, and then you didn't have to sit next to your smelly brothers and deal with all the fighting in the back row. And so I remember one distinct instance where I yelled shotgun, and I saw the car. But my older brother, that snake, that thief, he yelled shotgun, but I know without a shadow of doubt he did not see the car. But my mom was so annoyed with us, as she was often because we were four crazy boys, said, I heard Brian first, he gets the front seat. And I said, well, Mom, that's not fair. He did not see the car. She goes, guess what, son? Life is not fair. I've resented that statement for years. I don't know how many of you have heard somebody say that statement to you. By show of hands, lift them high, okay? Yeah, it's a crappy statement in my opinion, okay? Until just a few weeks ago, my 10 and 8-year-old are both old enough, tall enough, and weigh enough to sit in the front seat. And we're not playing the shotgun game because that's just going to cause fights. So we have a structured format where one gets it in the morning, one gets it in the evening, or it flip-flops days because we're organized parents, or we try to think we are. We're failing. It's okay. We're going to get better. And I decided to be nice and do the flip-flop from morning to evening. And my son was in the morning, and my daughter had the evening route on the way home from school. And he says, Dad, it's my day. That's not fair. And I said, guess what, son? Life's not fair. It feels better on this side of the equation than on the opposite side of the equation. And I think each and every one of us would recognize there are moments in our life where things are not fair. And everybody has a different judge for what's fair and what's not. But equal playing field, I think each and every one of us would agree that some of these scenarios are not fair. Like kids that are in the middle of a war-torn country and seeing bombs fly over their heads every day. That is not fair. Families who are struggling from these natural disasters like Hurricane Helene and going without a home. That is not fair. Folks that were placed into slavery because of the color of their skins or concentration camps for the ethnicity of their family. That is not fair. Or those stricken in poverty across most of our world just because of the place that they live. It's not fair. And each and every one of us in our life has experienced being on the wrong side of the fairness equation. And it's different for each and every person on what that looks like. Maybe for you it was in your workplace. For others it's in your community or your school. And some it's in your very own home. And many of those situations that we would say are not fair result in emotions bubbling to the surface of anger, frustration, wanting to retaliate. And that in and of itself is not wrong. But as a follower of Jesus, we are called to respond differently to things when life is not fair. And as we wrap up this series, Power Struggles, where we have been dealing with a lot of different dynamics that build that tension, today's message is going to lean in and teach us all how we can respond when things in life are not fair. Now, I want to take a moment and break down any misconceptions that you might have about your life with Jesus that a lot of people have. They think that when I start to follow Jesus with my life, everything is going to become sunshines and roses. Like, nothing's going to get me down. I said yes to Jesus, and everything is just going to happen. Every Wednesday, they're going to buy my coffee at Cowboy Coffee, and I'm not going to have to think about it, you know? I'm blessed. I have the favor of the Lord upon us, okay? But that is not actually accurate, okay? We, as westernized Americans, we tend to think that if something is causing us pain, it must not be God. Or if something in our life is challenging or it's a struggle, it must not be God. But that is not what Jesus said. In fact, in John chapter 16, as he was talking to his disciples, he had this to say. He said, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. Why do they need to have peace? They need to have peace because in this world, you will have trouble. But it's okay. I have overcome the world. Author Pete Greig and the leader of the 24/7 prayer movement had this to say about the topic. He says, anyone who says that it is easy to follow Jesus is a liar. He himself said that the way is narrow. And he went on, he said, but nothing that we forego in the cause of Christ, whether that's wealth, popularity, kudos, and not even our very lives, can come anywhere close to the return. The price we pay to follow Jesus, whatever it might be, will acquire for us the most astounding bargain of our lives. Can you imagine with me for a second if we all here at the Sunnyvale campus embodied that mindset? How big of an impact it could have on our very region. And that is why, as a church, we are addressing these topics, because we believe that if we can embody these principles that we've been walking through for the last 4 weeks, we will see transformation the more we, as the followers of Jesus, choose to live it out. And we've been learning from the examples of those that have gone before us. And today, we're going to learn from the example of Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers, in a letter that he wrote to some other followers of Jesus around AD 63. And here's what it says in his opening paragraph of this section of his letter. It says, "Dear friends, I warn you, as temporary residents and foreigners," temporary residents not of the region, but as temporary residents of earth, thinking about eternal mindset as citizens of heaven. He says, keep away from these worldly desires that wage war against your very souls. Be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus or not, this is something that makes sense. If you live at peace with the people that are around you and you tell the truth and you act with integrity, you are going to be able to stand tall when people accuse you or treat you harshly. In our house, we tell our kids all the time, do the right thing when no one is looking. So that way, if somebody calls you out or we find out something that happened, you can say, I did the right thing. And we always pray, I pray that you get caught every single time you try to hide something. And it has worked thus far. It's been fantastic. That's a great prayer, parents, by the way. I pray you get caught so I can find you out. But if all of us lived with this mindset, I think our world would feel a lot better. But we are struggling in this tension and the dynamic because oftentimes the outside forces that make their way in cause us to react to our emotions rather than the words of Christ. Now, I want to give you a little bit more context. Peter is writing this letter to a bunch of Gentile converts that are living across the Roman Empire. Gentile meant they were not the Jewish people that had grown up with the faith tradition. They were folks who had grown up in a society separate from the teachings of God and then has learned about the teachings of Jesus and converted and turned their back on Caesar as Lord because they believed that Caesar himself was a god and said, no, Caesar is not Lord. My allegiance is with Jesus. Jesus is Lord. And so this is a really big statement happening about 30 years after Jesus went back to heaven and was crucified and rose from the dead. And if you think about it, that was such a big statement piece, and they were dealing with harsh persecution as a result. They would often face social ostracism, economic hardship, verbal and physical abuse, sometimes even to death. And most of them were cut off from their families. Now, we live in a region that is very unchurched, that has their allegiance to a lot of things other than Jesus. Statistically, it's about 98% unchurched in this region, but we don't face that kind of persecution. But this letter written to those Gentile converts and to us today was not just to say, hey, here's some encouragement for yourselves, but a reminder that they were converted to the love of Jesus so that they could walk through and help others find that same peace that is available to him. So this letter is a guide for each and every one of us to walk into something in the midst of the power struggle that we face and life not being fair. So let's dive into some of the principles that Peter wrote for us. Starting in verse 13, it says, "For the Lord's sake, submit." It's a trigger word for a lot of people. Submit. No, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Don't tell me what to do, right? I am my own boss. I am me. No, submit for the Lord's sake to all human authority, whether the king as the head of state or the officials he appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and honor those who do right. That word submit there that we have bolded is the Greek word hypotazo. And it was meant in that context more in a military connotation, in arranging oneself under the proper authority. And this was designed so that you could go out and defeat the enemies. If you had rank and order, there was an opportunity for us to go out and deal with the issues as they arise rather than everybody being their own solo person. And so for the Lord's sake, we submit for the opportunity to win the war against sin and death. He goes on, he says, if it is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. He goes, for you are free, but yet you are God's slaves. So don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. They were living with this newfound freedom of, I am no longer dead. Because I have made my decision to follow Jesus, I am living in freedom. But he reminded them, with that freedom comes bondage to Christ. And that bondage is an opportunity for us to live for the things that matter to God rather than the things that matter to my flesh. And so, yes, you are free, and life may not appear fair to you, but you are a slave to Christ, which brings us to our first practice, which is we all need to learn how to practice submission. Nobody likes that, right? There's another way of saying this is we must submit for the opportunity to win. I remember on my 18th birthday, our neighbor across the street, his name was Michael. He was a very successful businessman, and he was an avid Porsche collector. Every single year as the new models would come out, he would trade in his old model for the new model. And we became really close family friends. We spent holidays together, and I would always come over and check out the cars, and we would talk with him. I went for rides with him. And on my 18th birthday, I got home from school, and Michael was outside, and he says, hey, happy birthday. I said, hey, thanks. And he throws me the key to his Porsche 911 Carrera convertible. He says, go have fun for a little while. See you in a little bit. It's like, let's go, baby. And I remember getting behind the wheel of that car, and I was like, I'm about to rip this thing. Like, let's go. And then it dawned on me. Although I have authority and freedom to go take this car and drive it however I desire, it is not mine. I need to drive it in a way that is respectful, that when I come back to Michael, I can say, hey, I treated what you gave me well. And that's the same thing with our lives when it comes to Jesus. Just because I have been given freedom from the bondage of sin does not mean I can go out and choose to do whatever I want when I want to do it. I was given that freedom for a purpose. I was given that freedom to walk. And as I practice submission, I learned the thing that Jesus showcased as he submitted to the authorities above him, is that eternal freedom comes from surrender. That the more I submit to his will for my life, I walk in this eternal freedom that comes only from a posture of surrender. And sometimes that's really difficult for us to understand in a world where we feel like there's evil at work at all the times. And in fact, next week we're going to start a brand new series called Supernatural, where we are going to talk about that tension and the reality of the things that are happening in our spiritual world and help us understand how can we overcome those things even in a posture of submitting to the earthly authorities above us. And we see Jesus live this out as well. I remember the moment where he sat next to Pilate, and Pilate said, do you know who I am? And he says, oh, you're only here because my daddy put you here. But even though Jesus was the full authority, he sat there and submitted to the earthly authority of what Pilate was doing because he knew it was going to unlock something eternally the more he submitted to him. So which brings us on to our second point, where Peter in verse 17, he goes on, he says, respect everyone and love the family of believers, fear God, and respect the king. This is a pretty radical statement to make to somebody that's being treated harshly, that is dealing with persecution. It's easy for all of us to go, oh, I like the middle part. Remove the bread, I'll take the meat. Yeah, I fully agree. I want to treat these people that are in here with us so loving and kind. They're walking through things. They might believe different than me politically, but they're a follower of Jesus. It's okay. Like, God will shift their perspective at some point. I'll love them well, and like, of course, I got to give reverence to God because, like, I'm not an idiot, and so I'm like, focus my attention on him. But you mean like my boss that's a jerk to me and is always giving me the bad projects? Or the people in my life that are always talking bad about my kids and the way that they act and always trying to parent me as I parent my children? You know who I'm talking about, right? You mean I have to respect them? Even the king, the person, what if that guy gets elected? Or that girl gets elected? You telling me? I don't know. I mean, their stance on that social issue is different than me, and I feel like I need to stand on the side of God. No. Respect everyone, even the king. Of course, you need to do it inside the body, but we're talking about everybody. Those that you disagree with, those that you don't like, those that are different than you. And the reason that we do that is because it gives us an opportunity later on to connect with them. Which brings us to our second point, which is that we need to learn how to cultivate honor. Another way to say that is we want to respect to connect. And the reason that we go down this path is because we believe that if we cultivate honor, we respect people around us, there is an opportunity by the way that we act later on when they see maybe the wrongs that they have done or something is going on in their life, they will recognize we have never belittled them. And as a result, they will choose the opportunity to ask or let us know or give us a vulnerability moment to then be able to speak into their life and share the peace that comes from Jesus. So we're trying to not win our arguments in every scenario, so later on we have the opportunity to win that person. Have you ever had a situation in your life where somebody's just really pissed you off? Like, raise your hand. Just really made you mad. And in the back of your brain, you're like, I am writing this person off, Maybe for you, it was your best friend who flaked on you again. Oh, I love you. We're going to spend time together. And then 3 coffee dates in a row, you're sitting at Starbucks or Pete's or right here at Cowboy Coffee, and then they don't show up. Oh, I'm so sorry. Something came up. Be like, well, you suck. Like, I don't know if I want you in my life anymore. We've all thought it. It's okay. Like, you maybe didn't say it, but you thought it, okay? Or maybe it's your landlord, and they reach out to you and like, hey, we're going to raise the rent. But we're not, the dishwasher that's not broken, like, it's good for you to wash the dishes. Like, we're not going to help you out on that, okay? Or maybe it's something even closer to home. Maybe it's your mother-in-law who gave your kids that snack that was not gluten-free, no sugar, ethically raised, and had no dyes again, Just to clarify, not my mother-in-law, okay? She respects all of our food rules, never had a problem with it, okay? Not speaking from experience there, okay? But when that happens, or you get that text message, and you're like, how dare they send that to me? And you read it without the connotation of body language and tone, and then all of a sudden, one of those scenarios happens, and you go, I'm about to give them a piece of my mind. I've had it up to here. And so you draft the best text message you've ever written in your life that's slightly passive-aggressive, but also demeaning at the same time. Or you work up that narrative of like, if they say that to me, I am coming for them. And then all of a sudden, your iPhone shuts off because it's not as good as an Android. Like, it was the Holy Spirit in that moment, right? Or like they come up to you and they're like, oh my gosh, I realized I totally forgot the other day. This is the thing that came up. Or you're like, oh, it's okay. And you didn't say something in that moment. You were about to blow it up. You were ready to fight, You chose kindness and love which cultivates honor in that relationship. Sometimes not saying something and just being loving and passive, I know how many of us love passivity, right? Is actually cultivating honor because you didn't go out and choose to put someone down. There's a difference between belittling somebody and just loving them. I love what Maya Angelou has to say about this. She says, I have learned that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So we choose to cultivate honor, and we choose to respect others for the opportunity to connect, because when things shift in their lives, we are now able to see a door open. And so we are going to practice submission. We are going to cultivate honor, and then we lean into probably the third and most difficult portion of this passage, starting in verse 18. It says, you who are slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. He goes on to say, for God is pleased when, conscious of his will, you patiently endure unjust treatment. That's a really hard pill for a lot of us to swallow. You're telling me that if I endure unjust treatment, God is pleased because that person has been put in a position of authority above me? Now, I want to clarify, we are at no way, shape, or form talking about abuse. If somebody is being abused or being mistreated or taken advantage of, that is not okay. But in this context, in this scenario, he's saying, even if your boss or your parents or that person in your neighborhood is treating you unjustly, I want you to patiently endure it and know that because you're doing that, God is pleased with you. Then he goes on to say, which checks our heart, of course, you get no credit for being patient if you are beaten for doing wrong. Like, duh, you deserve it, you know? It's like sometimes you have those moments as a parent, you're like, well, that one's going to hurt. Like, oh, this is what didn't work out. But like, well, like you kind of chose it for yourself, you know? Like, sorry. But if you suffer for doing good and endure it patiently, again, God is pleased with you. For God called you to do good, even if it means suffering. Just as Christ suffered for you, he is your example, and you must follow in his footsteps. That word example in the Greek is hypogrammus, and it's connected to the idea of a writing template. Like this is the template in which you follow. Jesus' life and death and the way that he resurrected and the way that he endured so much unjust treatment is the model for all of us. Which brings us to our third point is we need to learn how to model endurance. We need to learn how to make the difficult decisions now over the very difficult decisions tomorrow. It's kind of like a retirement fund. You choose to take a little bit of money out of your pocket now and save it for the future, believing that there's going to be something better for you in the future. And there's a reality that in this scenario, it's really easy for us to do this on the surface. Oh yeah, like things at work are hard, but like it's going to be okay. But really in your heart, you're just growing bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness towards the people around you. It's a slippery slope that if we don't check our heart and suffer well when we walk through things that may be unjust or may be hard to understand, it changes something inside of us. I think about the friends and family members and even our journey with some infertility. There's a lot of questions in those kinds of scenarios where you ask and you go, God, why? Don't you see our desire to have a family? And when we have a miscarriage, like it just tears my heart out. And it's really easy when somebody says like, oh, are you doing okay? Like, yeah, we're okay. We believe God. But over and over and over again, that bitterness can grow if we're not honest in recognizing the things of God are bigger than the things of man. Maybe for you, it's not in that arena. It's something related to a breakthrough in a family member that's walked away from the faith. And you keep praying and you keep asking God, like, why isn't this happen? Why haven't they come back? And everybody else, you go like, oh, I'm just keep praying for them. But you have a hardened heart towards God not answering your prayer yet. I think each and every one of us could think of a scenario. We have to remember that modeling endurance does not mean running from the pain. It actually means enduring it. Because if you run and you escape, you miss out on the potential impact that you could have. And there's a lot of bad theology out there saying that if there's pain, you run. If you don't like what they said, you cancel them and you make distance between you and them. If your job is hard and you don't enjoy it, you just leave. But there's something that happens. If you truly want to see change happen in this area of your life, you need to realize that modeling this endurance is the key to breakthrough that you want to see. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it this way. He said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And this was something that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. not only said, but he embodied it and he multiplied it in the volunteers that he raised up as a part of his movement. He was showcasing to them, we are going to stand in the gap and model endurance because we believe that there is something greater as we do this. As we endure unjust, unfair treatment, we believe that if we can do it with integrity, one day there will be a moment where we will all look at each other and things will change. So anybody that wanted to be a part of his movement, he made them sign a contract. I want you to see this contract that he put up for them. They had to sign this and say, I hereby pledge myself, my person, and my body to the nonviolent movement. Therefore, I will keep the following 10 commandments. The first one, I will meditate daily on the teachings and the life of Jesus. Because if they could do that, they would be fulfilling that call. If they would model that endurance, if they would practice submission, if they would cultivate honor, there would be something. But also to be reminded that our movement is not about victory. It is about justice and reconciliation. And the way that we are going to do that is we are going to model it by the way that we talk and walk in a manner of love, because we believe that God himself embodies love. And instead of being aggravated and being bitter and filling with content towards the other people, we are going to pray for them. And that fact that they might become free the more and more they see Jesus through us. And we will sacrifice our personal wishes in order that everyone would experience freedom. They wanted to make sure, as a part of this movement, there was no negotiation for being anything other than a living, breathing example of Jesus, because they believed that that was the key to help people see the equal rights of each and every human being around them. And so if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all of his followers could model endurance and embody the example of Christ, I believe today we can do the same in every sphere of our life. So I want us for a moment to get really practical. And maybe you've just been listening and engaging with our conversation, but you haven't been writing anything down. This is the moment I want to ask you to participate, to start writing something down, because I believe that we today can learn a few different ways that we can put this into practice starting this very week. And the first one is going to be that we are going to learn how to practice submission. I want you to this week identify an authority figure in your life. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your parent, maybe it is a grandparent, maybe it is a government official, somebody that has been placed in authority above you in one of the spheres of your lives. And I want you to find a way to support their legitimate goals this week. Maybe this means your boss is trying to get promoted. And instead of doing everything you can because you don't like him because he's not giving you the good projects, you're going to say, hey, I heard that you're trying to get promoted. What can I do to help you? What can I do to make sure that you get that opportunity, even though you're the one that wants to be promoted? Maybe students, what you're going to do is you're going to just clean your room and do the dishes the first time your parents ask you, instead of like, or like pretending like your AirPods are in when really like they're just not, and you just are using it as a non-engagement tool because you're like, oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. And it's like, you don't even have a phone. It's not connected to anything. Like, what are you doing? It's social anxiety. Like, just chill out, okay? Like, go clean your room. Like, and so each of us can think about someone or something in our lives that we could say, okay, I am going to legitimately work towards acting in submission and practicing the opportunity for that person. The second is we are going to practice how to cultivate honor. And I think it is so fitting that it is 1 month from the election. Because what we are going to do is we are going to find that person in our life that we disagree with, whether it's politically or personally or on some sort of social issue, and we are going to commit for at least a month. Like I said, at least, because we should probably do it longer. Commit for at least 1 month to only speaking respectfully about them and focusing on their positive qualities. So maybe you're a Trumper, okay? And you look at Kamala and you're like, I do not like her, okay? But guess what? For the next month, you are going to find the things you like about her. And if you're on the other side, you're like, I'm a Kamala, I can't find one thing about that man that I like. Well, just say, maybe I like he still has hair, okay? Whether it's fake or not, he's got nice hair, okay? His children seem kind. You know, whatever you are on your political spectrum, I'm not picking a side here. I want you to find something to say about that person for the next month that's positive, okay? And that means even in your text message and your social media posts, you have to stay honorable. Okay, I did this with my kids the other day. They were having this bickering fight. They're 8 and they're 10. They're sweet, they're kind, but they're monsters at times, okay? And so they were fighting with each other, and I was just like, sit down. Get a piece of paper and a pen right now. They're like, it's not a school day. I said, do what I told you to do. I'm your father, submission, okay? No, I didn't say it like that. I said, you're going to do it. You're going to sit here the whole entire night, and you're not going to have ice cream if you don't do it. And they're fine. So I said, I want you to write 10 things about your brother and 10 things about your sister that you like about them, 1 through 10. And then when we're done, you're going to tell each other those 10 things. They're like, I'm not doing it. I was like, then you go to bed right now. It was 4 o'clock, okay? And so as they sat there and they wrote these things down and they went 1 through 10 back and forth, all of a sudden, their heart posture changed. They hugged each other, they started playing, and it was peaceful in our house for at least 30 minutes. It was great. But cultivating honor is much more about your heart than the other person's. And so we're going to find somebody that we're going to practice submission, we're going to cultivate honor, and ultimately, we are going to choose to model endurance. So if you face an unfair treatment or something in your life that you would deem is not fair, I want you to ask yourself this question. How can I use this situation that I'm currently in to demonstrate Christ's love? Rather than seeking escape, I'm going to look for an opportunity to serve this person or this situation that I am walking in. Now, I want to remind you all, we are not called as followers of Jesus to suffer just because. It has always been designed so that others might see something about the way that we're living and open a door for us to share with them the true hope and love that Jesus has available to them. That's why we practice submission and cultivate honor and model endurance so that we have the opportunity to share Jesus and what he has done in our lives. Now, as Peter reminded them of these things, he also brought them back to how Jesus had done it all for us. And he quoted Isaiah chapter 53, showcasing to them that this was always a part of the plan. He said in verse 22, he said, he never sinned, nor ever deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who he believed was the only just judge and judged fairly. Then he personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and to live for what is right. It is by his wounds, by his sacrifice, by his submission that we are healed. Because once you were sheep who wandered away, but now you have turned back to your shepherd, the guardian of your souls. Peter is trying to showcase to them that Jesus endured and went through so much. And because he is our example, we might endure and go through so much for the same reconciliation that Jesus did for all of us could happen for others. He's inviting us to live boldly with love and to stand in the gap for the sake of others. Maybe you're here today and this is the first time you're recognizing and realizing what Jesus did for you. And you're saying, man, I want to be a part of that. I want to choose to submit my life under his authority. I want to cultivate honor in the way that I live by seeking after his will and speaking to others about what he's done in my life. And I want to model endurance by daily choosing to say yes to following him. And that's a simple invitation where you just ask him, Jesus, would you be the Lord of my life? I recognize that you are the ultimate authority on heaven and on earth. And I desire to submit to you. For the rest of us who maybe identify as a follower of Jesus, could you imagine with me if just those of us that are here in this room this morning at the Sunnyvale campus, if we fully embodied this reality and embraced these principles? Picture what our workplaces would be like. They would be transformed by employees who submit with excellence and honor to their bosses, even the difficult ones. Envision our neighborhoods being once again filled with people who respect and love each other despite the disagreements or the yard signs we have posted in our window or yards. And then think about the impact that we could have on our city if we chose to endure hardship with grace and purpose, pointing people to Christ by the way that we react and respond. This is the type of countercultural community that I want to be a part of. And I believe it's the type of community that if we could embody, would allow other people to start to see Jesus as an asset to their lives instead of one that's going to put them down. I wonder if you would be willing to join in and commit with me, starting this week, to practice submission, to cultivate honor, and to model endurance so that our region could be filled with the love of Jesus and we would be known for much more than the technology we create. Would you pray with me? Lord Jesus, we thank you for the example and for the life that you led. We ask that as we cling to this reality, that you would showcase to us opportunities to live this out, even as hard as it may be, so that the people that are in our lives and in our circles, even if they're different from us, would be able to experience the freedom that you have given to us as a result of your life, death, and resurrection. We humbly submit to you and honor your name as we choose to walk with you each and every day of our lives. We ask this in Jesus' name.